that's the beginning as well. Again, like because you never you're coming out for the rest of your life. Whenever you meet new people, new experiences, you again question it as to what do I say, or especially for example for myself now, when someone introduces me and they ask me what I do, automatically if I'm a I have a company that helps queer people. Oh, he must be queer. Okay, so I'm not like
Right, right.
by saying what I do, I'm coming out to any new person that asks that question to me. I'm okay with that because I've accepted that, and I don't have a problem with if your problem is your problem. That's how I see it. Is like,
Exactly.
but no, everyone's like that, and I know that, and then also that comes with its own layers. There's certain days where I'm feeling a little insecure, and
Exactly.
like I don't feel comfortable here, so I do still have it, but like, I mean, so it's a layered situation that happens to all of us, no matter what experiences or what journey we've been on, how strong or how spiritual or how whatever we are, we're still going to have to experience that for the rest of our life. Welcome to the Queer Quest podcast, your beacon of light and sprinkle of glitter in the queer community. I'm your host, Cristiano Green, CEO and founder of Queer Quest and a transformation coach for queer individuals. And together, we're embarking on a journey of transformation. Each week, we bring you a new training topic or connecting with visionary queer leaders in healing and coaching, diving deep into conversations that inspire growth, celebrate diversity, and empower you to live authentically. So wherever you are, settle in and let's get ready to unlock the vibrant potential within. This is where your quest begins. Hello, all you fabulous souls, and welcome to another episode of the Queer Quest podcast. I'm your host, Cristiano Green, the CEO and founder of Queer Quest and a transformation coach for people in the queer community. So this week on the podcast, we have a guest in the house. If you're watching this on video, you can see someone else with me. But if you're listening to me, I'm going to be introducing our special guest of the week. We have Ed Bell. And Ed is a dating and relationship coach for gay men. And he's also the author of a book, Boys Who Like Boys, which is, well, I'll let you tell us. Tell us about the book that you have just launched not recently. It's a relationship book, right?
Yeah, hi, Christina. Thanks so much for having me today. Yeah, so I work as a dating relationship coach for queer men, and also the author of a book called Boys Who Like Boys, which is it's kind of the self-help book we all needed growing up to learn how to navigate dating as gay and bi men. So yeah, it really came about because from a couple of my own experiences, difficult, bad dating experiences, and it really got me thinking about who we are as a community and how we connect in dating and relationships, and also how we're set up to succeed or not in dating and relationships. Because most of us, the vast majority of us, are raised in these heteronormative, straight environments. And then it's like how, most of us are thrown into this world, figuring things out on our own, learning to navigate this community without help. We can't rely on our parents, even if we have a really good relationship with our parents, which a lot of queer people don't. But even if you do, it's very difficult to go and kind of get that support there. So yeah, this book was really about kind of all the things we should have known or we should have found out as teenagers or in our early 20s in those early dating experiences. And so yeah, the work I do as a coach and did as an author is really about helping people to navigate all of that stuff.
Oh wow. And I love that because you're so right. Like so many people out there, no matter, I guess if you're heteronormative or, not, people don't talk to their family about sex or those kinds of feelings, but even less so of like for people who are gay or queer, going to your parents and asking them for advice on how you would handle this on Grindr would just like, I think that half the like, what the hell is going on here? Like, I don't want to look up there.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I get it. Why it's hard for people who might need to speak to their parents about something. Their heteronormative parents aren't going to be able to understand the same issues that us in the queer community face when it comes to dating and relationships.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the big thing. And it is like, who do you go to? You know, a lot of, because the other thing for a lot of gay and queer men is that we're not actually that good at talking to each other about relationships. Often the kind of sex stuff, and whether that's kind of the boasting and bragging or just kind of making jokes about those things, that's a lot easier for a lot of queer men than having those like deeper conversations about like what is it that I want from a relationship. And something I've seen in my own life as I kind of as I trained as a coach and have learned a lot more about myself in this process is I've noticed having much deeper conversations with a lot of my gay and queer friends about all of these things. And that's made my life richer for it. It's made friends' lives richer just to be able to have these opportunities to talk about these things, which again, we don't tend to get with our parents. We don't get from like sex ed at school. There's not a lot of, even now, there's not a lot of queer sex education or relationship education. So yeah, my kind of work is really centered around that, really helping people to figure out what it is that they want in the first place from their relationships and how are they going to get it and how are they going to navigate this community that's often sex first and everything else later, which, you know, is like there's most of us have sexual needs and want to find sex and things like that, but a lot of us aren't as in tune with what our relationship needs are and how we get those fulfilled and what that might mean.
Oh yeah, true and very true. Because I mean, I've been doing this for many years now, and I've spoken to hundreds, if not thousands, of queer, yeah, people in the queer community. Majority of them are, male, and
Uh-huh.
oftentimes when I ask people about what they're looking for, they will talk about sexual positions as their number one thing. It's like
Right, right.
so you're asking what they want from a relationship, and they say, I want a top who will take care of me, or whatever it is they'll say.
Right, right.
Like, well, what's beyond that? Because for me, a lot of times when I find that a lot of those people who are asking from that, a lot of those kinds of people actually haven't even probably even had sex before. And they're having their idea of what it is for them to be gay, and they see it as a sexual act instead of like a deeper, more meaningful experience, like of like a culture and a community as well. And do you find that you get a lot of people who also struggle to kind of identify what actually being gay or being queer means to them, especially when it comes to dating and relationships?
Right, and exactly, and that's the thing. And I think what I'd say is part of this is because so much of like the homophobia and repression is about sex. So it's kind of that about how we have sex or how we want to have sex. And so it's kind of that classic thing for a lot of people when they first come out, they've kind of been holding, I'm not a huge fan of the kind of idea of coming out, but this idea of like when you finally start to pursue
Acceptance,
quick.
acceptance of who you are.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get what you mean. Yeah.
Exactly. Most of us have that moment where we're starting for the first time to navigate, whether it's dating and relationships or just sex, as a guy who's attracted, as a man who's attracted to men, and a lot of the times there's a lot of repression there. There's a lot of, or like there's a dam of like all these feelings and desires that we haven't felt ready to explore yet, and so that's the reason. That's basically the reason why for a lot of gay and bi men once that's gone, once you kind of burst through that dam, you feel like a kid in a candy store, right? And you're like, I want to do this and I want to try this. And like, in a lot of ways, it's very healthy to let that out because it's been in there. These desires have been in there. But what it often means is that, yeah, we begin a lot of gay and bi men begin our journey by, it's like mostly about sexual exploration and the more kind of emotional side or romantic maybe is put to one side is not something that we kind of develop in the same way. And, let me be clear, there's nothing bad about having, focusing on exploring yourself sexually or exploring that side. I think one of the issues with our community, one of the challenges in our community is like, where do you go to explore this more romantic side or this more emotional side? A lot of people, we've met these people. I'm sure we all know these people. Maybe at times we've been a version of this person where everything really just is about sex and it's just about where's the next hookup and like what is my, like you were saying, like so many of us define ourselves by our sexual roles, and like that stuff is super important in a relationship. It is a significant, if you want to be having sex with your partner. Your kind of sexual tastes and preferences are a big part of what compatibility is in that relationship. But there's all this other stuff, like you were saying. And like really a lot of it is just is partly about being queer, about being gay, but a lot of it is just about being human and like who do you want to spend your life with and who is going to make you feel valued and seen as a human being and not just a body, not just as a kind of either a sex object or just someone who is there to have sex with. Um, there's this great phrase by Esther Perel, who's a psychologist, a psychiatrist working with relationships, and she says a lot of people are looking for, you know, a love story, but like, what is your life story with that person? And so with us, it's often like we're looking for the sexual adventure, but like, what is the life adventure like with this person? And that probably, you know, as a long-term relationship or short, medium-term relationship, sex is probably going to be a part of that, but what about the other stuff? What is that? Who do you want to be with? Who do you want to be having dinner with? And who do you want to be going traveling with? Or who do you just want to come home to at the end of the day? Or what is that? You know? And so, yeah, a lot of the work I do is about helping people explore what is that for them and what does a relationship look like for them, which may be a long-term relationship. It may be an exclusive relationship. It may be an open relationship. It may be exploring short to medium term relationships. It may be doing long distance. You know, there's all these different factors. A lot of something I see a lot in this work is, you know, a lot of gay men have this idea of like, we know what a hookup is, we know what a one night stand is, we know what a lifetime of marriage is, but in between there are all these different relationships as well. And not, you know, not every relationship has to be for a lifetime to be meaningful and fulfilling in different ways. And yeah, and there are plenty of ways to have casual sex, to have short-term relationships that aren't just about a transactional, you know, and just about having transactional sex that involve levels of connection, even if there's no commitment or there's no long-term sense there of what this is. So yeah, it's just really helping people explore all of that that's in, yeah, wherever it is in between, like no string sex and a lifetime of marriage. Like, what is that, and where are we all in that, and what do we want in that huge space or spectrum?
Of course, and I'm sure there's also a big factor of what you do is about helping people get to a place where they're ready for the kinds of things that they want. They do understand, okay, actually, I do see that there is more to relationships than just sex. And now I do understand what it is that I want. How do I make sure that I am also ready for those things? Because I'm realizing, oh my God, like I have to be vulnerable, but I don't know how to do that because or I, you know, I have to put myself out there and I have a fear of rejection. So what is it that you find when it comes to people? Because again, like I said, it's all well and good, like I said, to have the conversation of, as you said, to now understand it. But then the real work comes into play of like, how do I actually get that and become, you know, a match for those kinds of people that I'm looking to date as well, you know?
Yeah, exactly, 100%. And I guess it's kind of one of the things I often talk about in this work is kind of the three things that are like necessary for a longer term relationship. And so the first is chemistry, which is the physical attraction, that feeling of, it's not just like finding someone good to look at or whatever. It can be a few different things, but it's that feeling of like, oh, I feel drawn to this person. And so a lot of people, a lot of gay men, not just gay men, but a lot of people are just dating for chemistry. And it's just like, okay, I think he's hot. I think he's attractive. Great. That's enough. The second thing, this kind of second level is compatibility. And that's this deeper thing of like, yeah, okay, there are lots of people in this world you will find physically attractive, but for lots of different reasons are not going to be right for you. And so that's that, okay, we have chemistry, we don't have compatibility. And that might be something like, you know, a simple example is somebody who lives in a completely different town and you don't want a long term, you don't want to do a long distance relationship. But a lot of compatibility is things like, you know, maybe you're more extroverted and the other person is more introverted, and you're just not, in terms of like hobbies and interests, there's not much overlap in how you would live your lives together. So there's going to be this constant kind of tug of war between like, okay, one of you wants to go out and party all the time, the other one wants you to stay home. And I should say there are lots of relationships where there's a big difference between introversion and extroversion, and there are ways to navigate this. But one thing a lot of us don't think about is, yeah, what would my life be like with this person? How are we compatible? Sexual compatibility is an element of that. But what would our lives be like intertwined in some way? So, yes, it's chemistry, compatibility. But the third thing, as you said, really is that like emotional maturity or readiness to be in a relationship. And it's like, how good are people at communication, and how good are they at like knowing what they want and being able to be vulnerable and authentic in their relationships. And so yeah, you'll meet people that you have the chemistry with, you find attractive, you want to be around, you enjoy being around them. You have this compatibility of like, yeah, we have similar enough lives and expectations. We want a similar kind of relationship that we can be together. But if you and that person don't have that emotional maturity to be able to have these deeper conversations and be able to make mistakes and own that and things like that, that's going to become a, challenge in the relationship. And so again, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, is like, where do you learn these things? Where do you learn to like communicate authentically, and where do you learn to communicate kindly, and where do you learn to own your like, yeah, I was just going through a thing and I know I said that thing and I didn't mean it, or I know I acted in that way that was hurtful to you. Can we talk about that? Can we repair this? Is a huge thing. And yeah, finding those three things, chemistry, compatibility, and the emotional readiness is hard, is rare.
Definitely. And especially because, as growing up as gay men, especially, different places in the world or different generations, or, of course things have changed and made it becomes easy, but it's still not where it needs to be. You are taught different things about yourself growing up in a world where you had to express yourself. So it's also about unlearning and trying to take off a lot of the locks that you put around your heart or different parts of your emotional state, because you might have put on a wall to be perfect, because your model of the world as a gay man was, if I'm perfect, people aren't going to see my gayness. And then I might be the perfect son or the perfect student or the perfect employee or whatever it is. That will help me in being able to navigate this world better. And so for me,
Yeah.
to get down that emotional maturity to be able to uncover and actually have that, I have to unlayer some of that other wall stuff. So when you're people are coming to you for, I want to find a relationship, I think probably 50% or more of the work that you do actually is on them, instead of helping them to figure out how to date, because those tools are, this is communication, those kinds of things. But it's about the person who has a belief like, I'm not lovable, or if I go online, like we talked about rejection before. We haven't really gone too deep into it, but that's kind of the overarching topic that we wanted to talk about today, was that a lot of people have a fear of rejection, or they've dealt with so much rejection that even the smallest thing can top them over the edge. I know from my experiences that I struggle with a lot of rejection, and I might go on the online dating world, and as soon as I got some rejection, or because on Grindr or whatever, wherever apps you are, gay people can be mean to other people for no reason sometimes, right? They can say things about what you look like or anything, or just bring you down. So I would go on there. I would get if I got a couple of insults, I would pull myself off for a couple of months. And I would sit at home being lonely, wishing that maybe someone would come and save me, or maybe someone will see me for who I am, and all these things, right? But you have to spend a lot of time helping people who really want the love to overcome a lot of those belief systems and the experiences and the dealing with the rejection and all those things. So what would you say, like, to someone who's coming to you who struggles when it comes to managing and dealing with rejection?
Rejection. Yeah, 100%. Let me just say a couple of things generally about how coaching has worked for me, and then I'll get onto that specifically. And you know this, right? You've been coaching longer than I have. That a lot of the time as coaches, it's the very practical stuff of like, what specifically do you need to do or need to try to get what you want? But love coaching is about that stuff underneath, and some people call it like mindset or inner work or whatever it is, but it really is like, a lot of, how do you feel about going into this, and what are the kind of emotional triggers or emotional buttons that are stopping you doing this? And yeah, it's exactly what you said. And when I was writing Boys Who Like Boys, it was really interesting to look at a lot of ideas that apply to relationships and connections that other people had written about in different ways, or a kind of like folklore about dating and relationships in different ways, but apply it through that queer lens. And like, you know, a lot of people talk about authenticity being important in relationships. That's a lot of people talk about that in different ways, but it's like, why is it difficult for queer men to be authentic? And the reason for that, as a lot of us know, is that like we grew up having to hide who we are to some extent. So for basically, there's this great phrase. I mean, it's a super depressing concept, but there's the idea that like the scars of the closet to some level do stay with you throughout your adult life. You get better at being authentic, but that feeling of like, if I say this, will I be judged? Will I be rejected? We'll get onto that. Really limits a lot of gay, a lot of queer relationships, because people are afraid to set boundaries, because they're afraid to say how they feel. They're afraid to set boundaries. They're afraid to say how they genuinely feel, because at some point in our lives, we've all been there where we've learned that we can't be authentic. We can't be ourselves. And that kind of really, yeah, that really brings us on to the topic of rejection, which is a huge thing in gay dating specifically. Exactly that, as you said, we as a community of people, rejection is a huge part of how we kind of interface with the world, how we interact with the world. And yeah, on a kind of on a very specific level, is that thing, as you were saying, sometimes we get that bad rejection that really just knocks our confidence for weeks, for months, you know, longer term. And it was really interesting, you know, writing the book and navigating that in the way that rejection is just part of life and is part of dating, especially, right? Like we've all been rejected, whoever you are. No matter, it's easy to like look at some people and be like, oh, he looks great and he has this and he has this, how could he possibly ever be rejected? Again, that's the compatibility thing. Not everyone is right for everyone. But yeah, one of the big things, you know, if you've ever been in one of those queer in-person spaces and like everyone's there and then they're in their little groups and no one's really talking to anyone else, or like people are kind of locking around the room and sort of sussing everyone out, but like nobody's talking to each other, nobody's really interacting. Or as you say, online, it can be, you know, especially on the more like hookup apps, the kind of that end of the spectrum of apps, there is a lot of rejection. It's often not kind. It's often not delivered in a kind of supportive way, and it really does affect how we approach dating relationships and just what we think of our community. You know, it's there are so many great and supportive gay men out there. But if your experiences essentially have been like everyone, you know, nobody likes me, everyone is mean to me, because that's been the predominant experience you've had online, a lot of people, it's why a lot of people don't, you know, use apps or just don't really interact with the gay community or other gay queer people as much as possible, because they've had these experiences. Um, and something we should talk about, which was kind of one of the biggest things that came up for me writing this book, is this idea of what's called gay rejection sensitivity, or gay related rejection sensitivity. And basically, in short, there's a ton. This was a thing of like, like diving into this book. I was like, how are we not talking about this? Why are we not talking about this? This is a documented psychological phenomenon that psychologists know about, but why are we as a community not having conversations around this? And yeah, and so gay rejection sensitivity, gay related rejection sensitivity is basically the idea that as gay men, as queer people, we're rejected by society in all kinds of different ways, or we've experienced that rejection of society for being who we are, you know. And one of the things I'd just say at this point is, obviously for most of us, you know, and I'm sure for a lot of your listeners, we live in a more accepting time than has existed. You know, certainly society is more accepting than it was 20, 40 years ago. And that is true. But we also all have experienced rejection in one way or another, or we've experienced those kind of low level rejections of, can I hold this guy's hand in public as I'm walking down the street? Which is never really a question for straight people. Then no, straight people are never like, oh, can I, you know, can we do this public display of affection? We have felt that sense of, can I be myself in this space without there being huge consequences, or without me being unsafe, either, physically or just like kind of emotionally. Like, is there a chance people are going to hurl abuse us? So basically, we become so used to this sense of, am I going to be rejected for being who I am, that we become really sensitized to rejection. And so what gay rejection sensitivity is about is that they've done the studies on this. They've seen how it affects psychologists, researchers have seen how it affects people psychologically, like in the brain chemistry, all of those things, that when gay men are rejected, we feel it a lot more strongly than we would otherwise, essentially, because it's kind of trauma, essentially, because we've experienced so many rejections.
It's built up.
It's a huge deal.
Built up traumas.
Exactly.
I like to talk of it as like a bucket. And, most people who are, who live the heteronormative life, maybe their rejection bucket might be here. But for gay and queer people, our buckets are at the point where sometimes it's almost overflowing. And sometimes it's just that one small thing and it topples over, which is why like some person saying some random thing to you who you don't even know and it not even be true can hurt you to the core when like
Exactly.
society rejecting you. Might have dealt with your family rejecting you. Might have dealt with friendships or strangers or people in your workplace. Like you've dealt with it so much that you've built up such a sensitivity to it because you're trying to also walk around and navigate, how can I avoid this? So
Exactly.
you put on, they make themselves look straight, act straight, be perfectionists, hide away, whatever it is that they can do to play small because they are trying to naturally try to avoid any of those rejections that are out there, And as I said,
Exactly.
the major rejection or it could be the micro rejections, like what you said was like thinking about, can I even like put down on my census form, should I even put down census that I'm in a relationship with a man, or should I just pretend to say what it is, right? Which is why every time it's kind of like, the government put out these census boards. It all depends on how society views you as to which box you're going to tick because you don't want to get discriminated against, right? The same thing going to the bank or going to the loan. If you're doing something, you question, do I want to tell them about my relationship status? Because it's going to affect my ability to get a loan or anything like that. So we navigate it and we're so used to, like I said, having to walk around in the world trying to pretend it that we've like literally have stopped ourselves from literally living our authenticity. And we sometimes get lost in who the hell we are because we've been putting on all these masks to try to avoid all of that rejection.
Right, exactly. And so that's exactly it. One of the things with the research I was reading about gay rejection sensitivity, essentially the way it was explained that in some of that really resonated with me and ended up in the book is that it's like you get rejected by someone online or after a date. You're not just feeling the rejection of that, which is going to sting and hurt because rejection is not fun for anyone, full stop. But you're also feeling like every rejection you've ever felt sends up.
Like the bucket here topples over.
Right, and exactly. And so that's a really good metaphor. The one I sometimes use is it's kind of like if someone's been like punching you gently every day for the past 10 years. And so you like your arm's a bit tender, is a bit sore, and someone else gives an extra punch, that's going to hurt a lot more than like if essentially there's nothing there. It's kind of a wound or a bruise that these rejections really, yeah, just make us sensitized to that because we're already tender and sore from all these other rejections. But yeah, the practical outcome, as you were saying, is essentially that we like become masters of avoidance. We become really good because we always have this question. Again, even now in a society that's way more accepting than it was decades ago, a couple of decades ago, is that we're constantly having this question of like, am I safe to disclose this? Is this a good strategy idea to disclose this? And the classic one, I loved your census example. The classic one is like with your barber or your hairdresser. And like, if they're like, oh, okay, do you have a girlfriend?
Oh, yeah.
What do you do? Like, is it worth being like, oh, no, actually, I have a boyfriend, or actually, I don't have a girlfriend, but I'm gay, I'm queer, whatever. I don't date women. Do you have that conversation or do you just say no? And there's kind of a cost to any of those routes. There's a cost to not giving the authentic answer because you feel like, oh, you're kind of teaching yourself, oh, I do have to hide, which we often still do in this society. But if you disclose, there is that chance of like, is that going to change how this person thinks of me? Is this going to cause even just an awkwardness? Like, you know, I think most people are not afraid that if they have that conversation, the barber or the hairdresser is going to say, get out, or the barber is going to be violent or call them an F slur or whatever it is. I think most people are not afraid of that. But if that barber suddenly is like weird to us or is awkward, that is a rejection at a low level. That again, because of this sensitivity, we're going to be like, oh, like I sort of wish I didn't say that now because I feel awkward and I feel rejected from this. And so that's just one example, but it is those things that you were saying of like we have to think about that. We have to even that that's a question mark is like an emotional weight for us. That is like, yeah, you know, with your doctor, do you? A lot of people do feel safe with doctors, and it often does affect your health outcomes. So that's kind of different in some ways. But it is like, yeah, if I am honest and open about my personal life, which is relevant to our medical history, is that going to affect my relationship with my doctor? Is that going to affect the treatment I get or how, you know, how I'm treated around that?
And also
And it means,
people who have situations where their doctor is the doctor of the entire town or they live in, and so you disclosing information means like can I trust him to not say anything to other people? Like, you know what I mean? Like there's always so many. It's always just layered, right? It's in a very layered
exactly.
with how you answer any question because one, can I be authentic to who I am and answer this honestly, like I would love to be able to do in any normal situation? Or do I have to worry about not only like, well, this person thinks, well, like if they said it to someone else, could he get around? And then bang, like I'm now like outed for, you know, because I haven't told whoever in my life that because it's my personal business, you know, like it becomes this web and it can really eat away at you because you don't know, like again, you're weighing up what's the right thing to do. But each time, nothing you do is authentic because you've had to
Exactly.
the right answer to do. Are you ready to embark on a journey of transformation that's uniquely yours? Welcome to QueerQuest, the world's first and best personal development platform created by and for the queer community. Imagine a space where your authenticity isn't just accepted, it's celebrated. A place where you can grow, learn, and thrive alongside a vibrant community that understands you. At QueerQuest, we're more than just a platform. We're a family. Connect with like-minded individuals, share your stories, and empower each other to reach new heights. Our tailored courses are designed to address the unique experiences of the queer community, from self-love and confidence building to career advancement and beyond. We've got you covered. It's time to step into your power and transform your journey. Join us today at courses.queerquest.vip, see what we're all about, and sign up to begin your quest.
Exactly. And that's the big thing about this, the kind of emotional weight or kind of heaviness of every time we make these choices, we're like weighing up all these different things. And often there is no easy choice. There is no, like, concealing is a difficult choice because that kind of puts the burden or the weight on us it kind of reinforces this idea that we can't be ourselves. But if we are brave, if we make that choice of just being like, you know what, this is the truth, this is who I am, there's a weight to that because you don't know what's going to happen. So there's that emotional fear of like, how is this person going to respond? There's that, yeah, there's that not knowing and knowing that like you might have to deal with some consequences. And again, these can be low level things. This is not living in a world where obviously, you know, homophobic abuse and violence and words do still exist, but even if it's not at that level, it still affects us internally, psychologically. You know, as you were saying, like with the doctor example, yeah, like obviously, you know, medical professionals, confidentiality is a huge part of what they do. But yeah, if it's the one doctor in the town and, you know, if some breach of confidentiality there would absolutely change your life because you're not ready to come out to your family or whatever it is. And if that was breached, again, medical professionals, you know, a big part of that is the confidentiality, but the question of like, what happened if I disclosed this to my doctor and then that came out somehow, that got out somehow, can still have huge implications on people's lives. And so even the thought, the possibility that that could happen affects how we behave and affects like the psychology, it affects how we think and act around these things.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's a very internalized battle that we go on, and it doesn't just end. Like a lot of people think, oh, once you've come out, it ends, but it's
Exactly.
just the beginning as well. Again, like because you never you're coming out for the rest of your life. Whenever you meet new people, new experiences, you again question it as to what do I say, or especially for example for myself now, when someone introduces me and they ask me what I do automatically if I'm a I have a company that helps queer people. Oh, he must be queer. Okay, so I'm like
Right, right.
by saying what I do, I'm coming out to any new person that asks that question to me. I'm okay with that because I've accepted that and I don't have a problem with if your problem is your problem. That's how I see it. Is like,
Exactly.
but no, everyone's like that, and I know that, and then also that comes with its own layers. There's certain days where I'm feeling a little insecure and
Exactly.
oh, like I don't feel comfortable here. So I do still have it, but like, I mean, so it's a layered situation that happens to all of us, no matter what experiences or what journey we've been on, how strong or how spiritual or how whatever we are, we're still going to have to experience that for the rest of our life.
Exactly. And that's the big thing, that if you were if you were a life coach or a business coach, and most people are not a straight life coach, they don't exclusively work with straight, that doesn't really exist. Maybe they have a mix of clients, a proportion are queer or whatever, the majority is straight. You don't need to think about that. You're just like, yeah, I'm a life coach, I'm a career coach, whatever it is.
Yes.
And it's the same, it's the same for me with a lot of times. It's like how much, how many barbers have I told that I'm a relationship coach without saying it's specifically for queer people? That's it. Barbers seem to be my thing with this, for the same thing. And it is like, yeah, this is like something that happens every day. This is not like once a year you have to like deal with this. This is like every single day almost, or it could be every single day. And you're weighing this up of like, how brave do I feel? And like, am I actually in a space where I just don't want to deal with this today because I'm tired, or yeah, something else happened that's making me just feel a bit less secure than normal. And yeah, and the really hard thing with that, well, the first thing I would say is like, this is not just about saying to people, no, just be authentic, just get over your fears on this, because again, this is trauma. This is a thing that we're learning to navigate, and it's not as simple as just saying the solution is just be yourself. Everything will be fine, because that's not true. That is,
Yeah.
you can't
I think
guarantee.
I've been told the talk here with the bucket of rejection. For me to be
Exactly.
where I can handle things. No, and I was able to get into a healthy relationship and do all those things was because I actually had to work through all the stuff that caused me to have my bucket at here and overflowing all the time.
Right.
So
Exactly.
I'll go, you know what? That those things over there affected me. Those are things affected me. How can I work through these things? It took me a long, long time, and I'm still working through some of the stuff.
Exactly.
It was layered, right? But I couldn't be doing what I'm doing now, especially going online and social media if I was people of rejection. Because I get a lot
Is
of people, who will say a lot of things about me because I'm putting myself out there. And again, it could be
right. Is that
gay or queer people who may be feeling jealous or why is he doing that or whatever it is, right? But again, I have to learn to go, everyone has their own journey, everyone has their own story. I'm following my path. And I trust
exactly.
people who need the right support will come to me. And those other people, maybe when they're ready, they'll come to me, or maybe they'll come to some.
Exactly.
So it is what it is. So yeah, like I said, for me to be able to at a place where I can talk about rejection and actually move past it is because I've actually had to work through it, which I guess was around about the conversation of what we were talking about, how you get a lot of people who will come to you wanting a relationship, you help them figure out what they want, but then you have to help them get to a place of them being able to be in that kind of relationship they really want.
Exactly, exactly. So there's that side of just kind of learning the skills of what it takes to, to make a relationship work. But I really love the bucket metaphor you use, that it kind of is, one of the big things about coaching and other services like therapy and things like that is it really is often about like emptying this bucket of all these things that we're carrying or that allow us to put ourselves out there in more meaningful ways. knowing that, yeah, sometimes you might experience a bad rejection, and that's going to fill the bucket up with new stuff, and then you kind of have to drain it a little bit in one way or another. And that, yeah, like accepting rejection sensitivity sometimes is about saying, this feels a lot worse to me than it actually would be. You know, a lot of the thing with getting over rejection sensitivity is learning to put yourself out there, knowing you might be rejected, and like your fear of that rejection, not always, but most of the time, is worse than it will actually be. It's rarely the other way around because of this rejection sensitivity we have. But also knowing that, like, yeah, if you've been rejected in a way that was particularly upsetting, that is going to affect you for a while. That is not the solution. Is not just to put yourself out there tomorrow and say, screw all this, screw your feelings, because yeah, these are things we kind of inherit, or we pick up from living in this world. And you're totally right as well, in terms of we're talking like largely about relationships, and as a dating relationship coach, that's the focus of a lot of this. But it is just about queer community in general, and how kind of fear of rejection sometimes around friendships, and like, if I try and hang out with this person, what happens if they reject me around that?
Or
They
me
have it
being
too.
friends with this person, do they think that I like them or this way? Like, because again, it's gay men and gay men. You know,
Right.
people sometimes think that like, what is this person's motive of trying to become my friend? You know, like I know
Exactly.
I've struggled with that on both sides of the equation. Like, what is getting close to this person? What does that actually mean? Da, 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 da. Like, so it's
Exactly.
head fuck, and it is a
And
big
it's
well navigating.
Well, yeah, and it's like, oh, that's second guessing, right? And the classic thing or one of the classic things with rejection sensitivity is like, you kind of hit on someone, or you like invite someone to hang out, and they say yes, but they're like 70% enthusiastic. And you're like, oh, they were only like 70%. Is that what their way of saying no? And like, maybe that person was interested and they were just tired that day, or they're just like a kind of introverted person who's not gonna be like, oh my God, we should totally hang out. But then again, like, somebody says, oh my God, we should totally hang out. And you're like, oh, that didn't sound completely sincere, and even though they'd been very enthusiastic. So there's a lot of this like second guessing of like kind of trying to, sometimes in like you do read between the lines, but say again.
There's a lot of reading, sometimes reading too much into it, because again, as queer people, we've been taught an
Exactly.
internalized world. So everything that's said to us, we sometimes will internalize it, especially when it comes to something around that rejection. Is like, are we internalizing something that isn't actually rejection as a rejection
Exactly.
we're used to, and we're navigating and looking for it to try to protect ourselves from it before it happens? He's very
Exactly.
just saying enthusiastic. I'm just going to cancel because you know what? It's better I do it than he says he's not interested, and then you've lost your opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and you're completely right. It's that kind of like preemptive, like, oh, okay, well, if this person is not 100% on board, I'm just not gonna like touch that because maybe they were gonna reject me and that would hurt. And like, oh, if I just let this, like, if I just let this connection dwindle, then he can't hurt me because he can't reject me directly. And that's a huge thing in dating. It's one of the reasons for, so many gay men go on first dates, and that's it. And it's like, maybe it's actually quite a good date. But as long as like at least one of them were like, oh, okay, that seemed pretty good. But like, maybe he said this and he meant that, that was a sign he wasn't that interested. And why a lot of us are afraid to say, hey, it'd be nice to see you again, because we're afraid of him saying, actually, I don't want to. And that, when you might say yes,
Doesn't reply first, and then the next person doesn't reply, and then this whole thing of like ghosting happens. Of like, oh, I never heard from him again, but I also never reached out to him again as well.
well, that's the thing. Exactly. And it's kind of this thing I often talk about is like, are you rejecting yourself preemptively? Like, are you the one who's actually rejecting yourself? Because often it's more comfortable to do that. It feels safe because we're in control of that. But it's exactly what you said, when it's like, we sometimes call it ghosting, but like, if nobody gets in touch with each other, it's kind of not really a ghosting, but it's like people are afraid of being ghosted, or being, if I message him and he doesn't message back, like, what does that say about me, or how am I, and this is kind of what you were talking about before, like, what stories am I going to be telling myself? That's the big thing. It's like that internal, is he rejecting me? He's rejected me. And what does that say about me? Does it say that I'm a bad person, I'm unlovable, I'll never find someone? Or does it just mean this person in this case at this time was not interested.
And that's then whole out
It's huge.
medicine as well, and figuring out that it's like, how can you reframe this? Like, are you giving this the need,
Exactly.
meaning to every rejection that you're unworthy, you're not good enough, you're unlovable? Or is it that this situation over here is XYZ? Like this one here is because, look, obviously I'm not interested in this person anyway. So why am I getting hurt because he doesn't want to go on a second date with me? And the only reason I wanted to go date with him was because I feel lonely and I was just don't want to, like, but because that's a lot of the time too, is like we sometimes will push something because we're like, hey, like, just in case, maybe it'll be different on the second day, and we'll keep pushing it. And then I guess
Exactly.
and you're like, I didn't even like him anyway, but you still get extra hurt because you've been trying to invest in something because of, you know, whatever it is, fear of being alone, fear of whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, the bigger thing I would say here, which I mentioned earlier, is just like rejection is just a part of life, is part of dating, taking those risks and ending up disappointed. And that's true of like jobs, finding employment. You're just not going to get every job you go for. And it's the same with friends. Sometimes you're going to meet people and be like, oh, I really like this person's vibe. I'd love to be a friend with them. And maybe they're not really looking for friends right now. Maybe they're just not feeling the same vibe back to you. And the same in dating, that there are going to be plenty of times that you meet those people that you actually would love to connect with, but for whatever reason, maybe they're compatible for you at some level, but not vice versa. For whatever reason, for like a million different reasons you can't control. And the only way you find that out is by giving that a shot, is by shooting your shot. And one of the things about rejection sensitivity, that another way it can kind of manifest, is often when we really like someone, we feel that fear a lot more strongly. Like it's much easier to be rejected by someone we're not actually that interested in, we're not that attracted to. And so it can manifest as like a lot of the time kind of shooting lower than we would like, or kind of shooting for partners that we're actually, I'm not going to say not interested in, but are not the people that we could be connecting with, because we're playing it safe, because we know that if someone we kind of half like rejects us, it's easier to move on. Whereas if it's someone we're really invested in, it's going to hurt a lot more. But longer term, like, do you want to be with a partner you're half invested in? Or do you want to be trying people that you're like, oh no, I actually really like him. Like I really could be with him longer term. And so, yeah, it's the big thing with rejection sensitivity in dating is how much it limits us in terms of finding these deeper connections or finding meaningful connections, because it's so emotionally, we're a lot more reluctant to pursue the things we want because we're afraid of what would happen, how it would make us feel about ourselves if we didn't get them.
Mm. Oh, what a
Which
conversation.
is devastating. I know, it's just like, is the big thing of this is why I say with rejection sensitivity, of all the things I picked up and learned about queer psychology and queer culture writing, Boys Who Like Boys, is that this feels central to almost everything, in so many different ways of learning as much as we can to be comfortable being rejected, and finding that really strong sense of who we are, so that each rejection is less personal. It's still going to feel a bit personal, but it's less personal. And yeah, it's devastating. It's like, it's so important to like dive into this stuff. It's sad in a way that we have this extra hurdle, these extra barriers to figure out. But yeah, sometimes, people often ask, like, what's the single biggest thing? If I have to pick one single thing that would improve people's dating prospects, people's dating life, and usually for gay men, for queer men, it's learning to deal with rejection. It's learning to get past these things as much as possible, so that you are putting yourself out there, taking things as unpersonally as possible, as much as you're able to do that. And yeah, just really learning to kind of ride that wave of knowing, if you're putting yourself out there and getting rejected, then you're doing it right. It's going to feel shitty, but you're doing it right. There's this, I also work as a writer musician in another field. And there's a story of Stephen King. I think it was Stephen King. Pretty sure Stephen King used to save all of his rejection letters as a writer. I think he put them on like a big, he had like a cork board, what it was called, a pin board. He would put them on because he was like, yeah, this is me trying. This is me putting myself out.
My badges of honor because I'm actually putting myself. It's time. Yeah, I get that.
And then I guess I would say that, that's the big thing of this, where it's going to feel like if you're getting rejected, it's going to feel like you're failing. It's going to feel like you're doing it wrong. But what if you're actually doing it right? What if this rejection is just leading, that thing of like rejection is redirection. What if these bridges may be closed off, but they're guiding you towards, wherever it is you're going to be in the end.
Yeah, I find that as long as we, as queer individuals, are being as self-aware and self-reflective as we possibly can, to realize, okay, like, what happened? What is the real thing going on here? What's the real picture?
Right.
What, like, did I actually do something wrong? No, or was it just that we weren't connected, or we weren't a good match, and whatever it is? Because
Right. Is that
put it into the right bucket, like, you can realize, actually, you know what? I'm not going to get hurt by something when we weren't a good match, right? But again, as you said,
right?
if
Exactly.
this person is a good match, it then often leads to someone feeling like, okay, this hurts more because I thought this was potentially going somewhere, or it could go somewhere.
Right.
But again, those are the spaces where we need to, like I said, reflecting, okay, how can I find more people that are like this, but meet my match, meet the one that is like, what was it about this person that made me feel drawn to him? And why is this one not the right one? So then how can I find myself
Exactly.
getting closer to the right one as well?
Exactly. And that's a really good way to put it. And sometimes you're not going to know the reason. You're not always going to get a reason for the rejection. Some people give you a reason and it's not the actual reason. They're either trying to save your feelings, or they just don't know, or whatever it is.
Find that we often will know, even if someone's going to tell us or not, like, someone's going to say it, and whatever it is over here, it's like, it doesn't necessarily matter. It's like, how did I feel about that person?
Exactly. And that's what I was going to
Yeah.
say. Like,
So yeah, what's my compatibility? What's my chemistry? What's my connection? What's my like? Okay, and then you take that away and move to the next step.
well, exactly. One of the big things about compatibility is, do I want to be with someone who wants to be with me or not? You might think if somebody you really like rejects you, it's going to hurt and you're going to be disappointed and you're going to be sad, or, whatever. But like, do you want to be with someone who doesn't want to be with you? Do you really want that? Do you really want to be in a relationship where you have to constantly be persuading someone to stay, or kind of constantly performing to show your worth? And do you want to be in a relationship with someone who wants you? Or, or not? Would you want to be in a relationship with someone who doesn't want to be there? And when most people think about that, the answer is obviously no. And again, the rejection sensitivity is going to make it, being rejected is going to make it hurt and feel worse than it is, or should, or would do otherwise. But yeah, it's, what do what do you really want? Do you want someone who's going to respect you as you are and love you as you are? And the answer for most of us is yes, when you get to the bottom of that.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, Ed, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the Queer Quest podcast this week and sharing your knowledge. I think it's been a powerful conversation. I trust that there are many out there who are getting a lot of value from today. And anyone out there, who feels compelled that you've got a question or you want to share your story, you can reach out to me on social media and ask me any further questions. But I'm sure someone had a question for you. How can people, out there find and online? Tell us, have you got anything coming up, or you want people to know about what's going on with your services?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, just want to say thanks so much for having me. This is a really great conversation. So basically, Better Gay Dating is all of the social media handles. Post mostly on Threads and Instagram at the moment. And bettergaydating.com is where everything is. So if people want to know more about working with me one-to-one, I'm working on a few group programs at the moment that should be out sometime next year. I also run these Queer Men Circles, which is a space for gay, bi, queer men to get together virtually and talk. But yeah, all the stuff, there's blog articles, everything's there, bettergaydating.com.
Beautiful. And we'll link bettergaydating.com down below. So if anyone wants to click on it and go to it, it's super easy.
Perfect.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Ed. And for everyone out there, we'll be back next week with another episode of the Queer Quest podcast. Until then, always remember that you've got this and I've got you. Bye for now.